Hello guys and welcome to my new video. So today I decided to do a RESTO DRUID 5-man guide. So I've done these guides before, but I feel that there's a lot of different talents that I choose now. There's a different game style with tier 20 and things like that, so I decided to update it. Hopefully this is not going to be too long, but I'm going to go through the tier 19 game style, the tier 20 game style, and also a game style that you're not really required to use the tier in 5-man. I consider 5-man or Mythic Plus content to be the most versatile in terms of gear, in terms of talent choices, because I feel that you can get away with almost any talent choices in 5-man because there's so many different variations that you have to consider. The DPS, how geared are the players in your group, what kind of affixes there for the week. So I actually feel that almost any talent choices can be justified. There's really no talent choice that are set in stone. I feel you can change it up around and things like that. Now, first of all, I'm gonna try and describe my current 5-man set and my current 5-man talents. So first of all, I use actually tier 20 4 set and tier 19 2 set for this tier 20 5-man item set and game style. With this game style, there's actually quite a few things that change because of how tier 20 works. Your Efflorescence is a lot more valuable. You most likely will use a different talent choice. In this case, I'll be using Prosperity. Your second one most likely going to be Displacer Beast. After this, in 45 tier, you can actually choose any talent choices here. Feral Affinity, if you feel you can go and do the kitty DPS. I have a video about kitty DPS as a resto druid. It's actually a lot of fun, but for some affixes like Quaking, you don't really want to go in the melee. So it doesn't always work, but there's a description down below. And Guardian Affinity is just purely there for the damage reduction, and it's also really nice to have Frenzied Regeneration as a bear, which allows you to get healed up really quickly. But you gotta keep in mind that you have to take the damage first, and you gotta use it after that to get the heal. And now let's go to the rest of the talent. Typhoon is usually the best one to take. It works really great for affixes like Sanguine, where the mobs leave red puddles below them that you can push them out. It's a gentle push. It's not really going to interrupt the DPS too much. After that, you will have, which I choose, Incarnation. I have Sword of the Forest here because purely of the Legendary ring that I use. Cultivation, sorry, I meant to say Cultivation. Cultivation is usually the talent of choice here. Incarnation can absolutely be used here. I don't use Incarnation on any of my tier 19 or tier 20 builds purely of the fact because most of the time when I pop it, it's 30 seconds. It lasts for 30 seconds. Probably I'll make use of it. I'll make 10 seconds of that useful, and then after that I'm just gonna be like, okay, I'm in a tree and there's really nothing to do. I wish I could go back into kitty form and DPS. And second of all, I don't really use this very efficiently. Sometimes I'm like, there's not enough damage, or is there enough damage for me to pop 3? If I'm gonna pop 3, what happens if down the line the other boss someone messes up? So I don't, especially in pugs, I don't really account. You have to account for the fact that maybe someone's gonna mess up and you're going to use 3 for a specific boss, but then later down the line there's a lot of damage and you wish you had Cultivation. Cultivation just passive healing. Now tier 90 is absolutely like 90% of the time is gonna be Germination. This is like a pure 5-man talent. It's a pure thing that makes Mastery really strong for Resto Druids in 5-man as well. And tier 100, I've actually swapped around all of these at some point in Legion. I've played with every single tier 100 talent, and I feel every one of them have a specific scene or scenario where they can work really well. It's not really governed by tier 19 or tier 20. It doesn't matter what tiers are you using. You can just use any of these talents. But this is something that I currently run at the moment. I swap around between Moment of Clarity and Flourish, actually, between a lot of the Mythic Plus dungeons. So I actually tend to run more with Moment of Clarity, but there's a reason for that. So this is my talent choices. This is my talent gear tier 20, 4 set and tier 19 2 set. Tier 19 2 set is extremely powerful. I use the Deceiver's Grand Design for Trinkets, and I use a stat stick as well. The legendaries that I run with is Soul of the Archdruid. Soul of the Archdruid purely for the fact because I'm running Prosperity, and by running Prosperity I will have more Swiftmans. By having more Swiftmans I will have more procs of the Soul of the Forest. And I use Pridus because I feel Pridus for high level dungeons is one of the best legendaries there. It's going to save your life, especially if you have a record that tells you when your Pridus is about to be refreshed. I think it's every 30 seconds that it gets refreshed. Every 30 seconds you can go into your bear form and your shield is going to be bigger because Pridus activates on your max health. Your max health in my max health in bear form is 7.7 million, so my shield is going to be a lot bigger than what it is. Why don't I run Valence? I don't run Valence because I feel I have really good replacement trinkets for Valence, and I don't use it as often as I use Solo the Archdruid ring, in a way, because let's look at this. When you pop your Swiftman, I get my Solo the Archdruid buff. Now in raid scenarios, you most likely will be using Wild Growth for this. Now in 5-man scenario, your tank is going to be taking a lot of damage. I'm going to use Rejuvenation, a really powerful Rejuvenation. What if your tank is already at like 10% HP? I Swiftman and then I use a really powerful Regrowth. Like this, if with Moment Clarity, this can crit for 4 million. I've seen this critting for 4 million with Moment Clarity and Solo the Archdruid buff. And then, for example, what if there's a lot of AoE damage from something like Quaking and Bursting at the same time? I'm just going to go Wild Growth. So you have 3 options in 5-mans where you can use your Soul of the Forest buff. All of them I feel are very viable based on the scenario. Like I said, in raid scenarios, you most likely will just use your Wild Growth because that's the highest HPS increase and going best mana usage as well. So that's the pure reason why I'm running with Solo the Archdruid ring. I usually tend to swap from this to Valence, depending on the fight, depending on the Mythic Plus dungeon I'm doing. And like I said, Pridus is just the best health, the best. It's going to prevent deaths, and in 5-mans, deaths, one death can lead to a whole wipe. One death can lead to a key that's not depleted, but just not in time, so it prevents you from getting extra loot. You might get kicked and things like that, so Pridus can actually really help you with that. Now, what kind of game style you play with this? This tier 20 brings a different game style because, like I said, you use Prosperity, you get two charges of Swiftman. Now, I use Moment of Clarity for this purely for the fact because on some tyrannical, really high tyrannical keys, it procs a lot. First of all, Moment of Clarity or Omen of Clarity, which gives you a free regrowth, procs from your Life Bloom. Once it procs from your Life Bloom, it gives you 3 charges. Now you have 3 charges, and it also makes your regrowth 15% stronger. So it's a random proc, but it tends to proc a decent amount. And I have 3 really, like for example, now I have 3 free regrowths that are really powerful and free. On some tyrannical, really high Mythic Plus tyrannical keys, mana can be an issue. Mana can be an issue on tyrannical keys. Like there are fights which might take you 5 minutes to kill and can be really heal intensive, but that's a secondary effect. I'm using this because for a lot of tyrannical fights, it's going to be single target damage incoming, and if you don't heal them up within like 2 seconds or something, like you need instant heals. If you don't heal them up in 2 seconds, they can die. So Moment of Clarity is also a mana saving tool. It also allows me to account for affixes, which are more single target heavy. Affixes, things like tyrannical is very single target affix, depending on the boss, but your tank can be taking a lot of damage. I feel Grievous can be very single target intensive, where you'll be spamming much more regrowths. And I feel that Grievous is actually a pretty decent week to use Prosperity with, because 2 charges of Swiftman tend to bring people to full HP when Grievous hits. So now, I run Moment of Clarity when there's more single target damage than AoE damage. Let's say, for example, I will swap, what's a good week? Bursting Quaking. Bursting and Quaking is intensely AoE damage. There's just, most of the time there's going to be 5 people taking a lot of damage, and I tend to run Flourish with this. So I tend to, when people take a lot of damage, I tend to Swiftman and I tend to Wild Growth, and this really helps out. And I Wild Growth in between the Quaking, so I don't get silenced. Really important as well. But the point is, so I swap from single target healing to AoE healing, basically with my tier 100 choices. Flourish more AoE healing because you can Swiftman, you can Wild Growth, and then you can Flourish, and then you can just watch your HOTS do real healing. With Moment of Clarity, it's on cooldown now, but with Moment of Clarity, you can see that single person took a damage. Maybe your Moment of Clarity proc, you have 3 free regrowths, and those regrowths are going to do a lot of healing. So that's the advantage. Now, what's the kind of game style it is. So with tier 20, it's a lot more efflorescence oriented. With tier 19, which I'll show you later on, it's a lot more regrowth. With tier 20, it's almost like your regrowth is kind of replaced by your efflorescence. So the moments where you would actually regrowth, you probably would consider more about placing efflorescence under them and then swift mending. Because the amount of healing that you're gonna get from that, you can see I have increased efflorescence ticks. The amount of healing that you get from that, from the 3 targets, those 3 targets are just gonna boom from 10-20% to full in a couple of seconds. It's actually insanely strong, especially for, let's say you have 3 melee characters, including which are tanks. So if you have a tank and 2 other melee DPS, you absolutely, this tier 20 build is gonna be a godsend. It's gonna be really, really strong. Melee is all, there's 3 melee in the efflorescence, and most times, every time you see melee taking damage, you just swift mend and then you heal yourself with the other ranged. Now, if there's like 4 ranged in the group, you're gonna have 2 people. You're gonna have yourself and tank in efflorescence in most of these situations, because you will have to utilize. You can tell your DPS to stand in efflorescence, but pugs don't always listen. So a lot of the healing now, from a lot of testing with tier 20 and tier 19 2-piece, efflorescence will be your #1 heal in the whole dungeon. This happens for about 99% of the time, unless you have like 4 range, which is going to become harder. But like I said, with tier 20, when you feel you're gonna be regrowing, especially when there's 2 people taking damage, 2 or 3 people taking damage, when you feel you're gonna be regrowing, think about efflorescence and swift mend. That's gonna actually heal them up really quickly, and you have your regrowth to use on other targets. It's actually a really viable strategy, and you see how powerful efflorescence is. It's really, really powerful. And like I said, you get swift with Solo the Archdruid Ring. You get the option of using really powerful rejuvenation, regrowth, or wild growth. So again, you're using 2 things at the same time by using the legendary and using tier 20. This is a very, very good build, I feel. Now, I feel I covered tier 20 in a decent way. Now let's go to the tier 19 build, which I don't actually use anymore because I have a really high tier 20. So tier 19 build, it's not what I'm using at the moment, because you don't need tier 19 4-set. Tier 19 4-set is actually quite weak in Mythics, just because of how it works, because you're always gonna have rejuvenations and germinations on like most of the targets in your raid, because in the party, because there's only 5 of you. It's not like a raid scenario where you have to hot up 20 people. But either way, tier 19 4-set is really, really not as strong or recommended to actually run in Mythic Plus content. You're much more better to just running 2-piece tier 19. In every build, you should have at least 2-piece tier 19. Tier 19 2-piece, Wild Growth grants you 4000 mastery for 7 seconds, is incredibly strong. Especially because for Resto Druid, stat priority is something like Haste Mastery, Biz. Haste Mastery is just so powerful. Mastery acts in the same way as like an intellect would. Just think of it as an intellect. It just boosts your healing. It boosts your healing because you will have multiple hots on targets. Life Bloom to rejuvenations, cultivation proc. You will have multiple hots on targets, and it's just gonna increase your healing. Haste, you need to make sure to heal. You need to make sure to heal that 10% person in about 2 seconds, or they're gonna die. So fast heals, fast hots are gonna really help you out with that. And think about it, mana is not an issue. Every time you actually pull a mob and then you get out of combat, drink. Go and drink your mana. Bring 50, 60, whatever mana potions, mana drinks that you can get, and make sure you drink between every pull, especially for really healing intensive affixes like bursting, quaking, and anything with grievous. Honestly, is gonna require a lot of healing. So you need to make sure to bring these mana potions and drink for every pull. So like I said, tier 19 2-piece is incredibly strong. If you don't have tier 19 4-piece, or if you just have the 2-piece, just make sure, first of all, you should only be using tier 19 2-piece, and then every other piece of gear should be the highest item level you have. That's if you don't have tier 20 4-piece, or if you don't like the Efflorescence build. So you should be running at least tier 19 2-piece, and then everything else as high as you can get. If you can, haste and mastery prioritizing, because it just works so well. And now, so with tier 19, it's going to be a lot different playstyles. So with tier 19, I feel from personal experience that it's all about making sure you have HOTS on everyone in the party. And those HOTS might not even be like your life-saving tool. They might not save people. if they're taking constant AoE damage, or they just get hammered by like teaming mobs, or like skittish. There's a melee who pulled aggro, and you have HOTS on them. Whatever, they're gonna die unless you're gonna regrowth them. You use these HOTS as a buffer to your regrowth, because the more HOTS you have on that target, the stronger your regrowth is going to work. So you just keep HOTS on everyone, you make sure you have all these HOTS, and then when people take damage, you're just gonna supplement them with regrowth. Regrowth is gonna be by far your #1 heal with tier 19 2-piece build. And it's a different kind of build. You're gonna have different items, you're gonna have different talents. For this build, I absolutely would recommend Abundance. I feel it works really well. And you don't use it for the increased healing, touch, casting speed. The only time I can't really showcase it because you need to have lots of regrowths flowing. But if you have a lot of regrowths, so Abundance, the way it works, for each rejuvenation you have active, the cast time of your healing touch is reduced by 10%, and the critical chance of regrowth is increased by 10%. So what that means basically, the more rejuvenations you have on the target, your regrowth is going to have a 100% crit chance, and your healing touch is going to be really, really quick. But you don't really use it for the healing touch, because the only reason why I can see you casting healing touch, which is going to be like less than a second, is going to be really, really fast, is when you're actually running out of mana and you can't really use anything else. But you want to have those sweet, huge regrowth crits with Abundance. They're going to be really big, and I actually tend to always run Moment of Clarity for this build. I run it something like this: Abundance, Displacer Beast, Guardian Affinity, Feral Affinity, it doesn't matter. Typhoon, Cultivation, Germination, and Moment of Clarity. Moment of Clarity is, like I said, it's gonna buff your regrowth, it's gonna proc from your Life Bloom, it's gonna give you 3 free regrowths. Like again, I said, tyrannical bosses can't cause mana issues. It's gonna give you really 15% extra on regrowths, you can see right now. And Abundance is gonna give me, based on the rejuvenations that I have, it's gonna give me 100% crit. So you can see here, I'm critting for 1.1 million regrowths with Abundance and Moment of Clarity. So this whole gameplay style, rejuvenate everyone, and when people take damage, regrow. That's what tier 19 2-piece is. And like I said before, tier 24-piece build is a lot different. Instead of actually regrowing them, of course you're gonna regrow them if they are really low or whatever. But if they're going down to like safety, like safe HP levels, like 50% or whatever, really think about Efflorescence and Swift Mending, and maybe then wild growing or regrowing or rejuvenating based on the scenario. But your Efflorescence is gonna be your #1 heal with tier 20, and your regrowth is probably gonna be your #1 heal for tier 19. And you don't even need to have any tier sets, but I highly recommend, if you have no tier sets and you're looking to farm any kind of tier sets, the best tier set right now would be to use tier 19 2-piece, because tier 19 2-piece is easy to get. First of all, you can LF4, well, LF4 is probably going to be really low, but you can run some pugs or something like that. But tier 19 2-piece is really strong. If you have tier 20 2-piece, tier 20 2-piece is very weak. It's nothing compared to what tier 19 2-piece is. And like I said, I covered the stats, I covered the talents. There are really only a couple of legendaries that you should be using or that are viable in 5-man scenarios. They're very similar to what's viable in raids. Like I said, that for my tier 20 build, I do tend to go with Soul of the Archdruid and Pridus. With my tier 19 build, I don't really use it, but I do tend to go, okay, dismiss the shoulders, but I do tend to go with Valence and Pridus. Valence and Pridus seem to be one of the best combos for tier 19 2-piece combo. But like I said, there's only really a few legendaries that you really should consider using it for 5-man scenario. Pridus is like really strong, purely for the fact that it's going to save lives in 5-man scenario. In 5-man scenario, one person dies, it's like GG or whatever. The hands is probably the only time I actually use hands is on like necrotic, when I want my iron bag to be way low cooldown. Like, it does have this niche usage, but like, I mean, if you do tend to use hands, you do have to go with Stonebark talent as well. It makes iron bag like really low cooldown, and it makes it heal the target more. And then necrotic, having an iron bag can actually save the tank's life if the tank doesn't know how to properly use it. But very niche scenario where you'd be using the hands. Belt is actually very strong for 5-mans. Belt is actually strong for raids as well. Belt is an overall very good legendary itself. I would use the belt if you feel a tank is taking way too much damage, if the tank is under geared, if the tank is if it doesn't play the class often or it's not playing the class properly, it's taking way too much damage, the belt can actually be like, I'm just gonna put Life Bloom and just rejuvenate and just not worry about the tank whatsoever. That's what the belt allows you to do, and I would highly advise you to use the belt if you feel your tank is underperforming or under geared or whatever. So the Archdruid, like I said, the ring is actually very strong with tier 20. Only with tier 20 I would actually consider using Solo the Archdruid. With tier 19 2-piece build, I wouldn't really touch it. And Balance is also a very strong legendary. So it's basically Valence, Ring, Belt, and Pridus that you should really like. If you have any of the combinations that I mentioned, you can use the tier 20 build for 5 months, you can use the tier 19 build for 5 months, and it should be covered basically. Every other legendary is kind of subpar. Like, I mean, you can make use of Zephus if you get, and where is it? You can make use of Zephus if you actually get Mass Entanglement, and he has a 30-second cooldown. Zephus has a 30-second cooldown. So if you can actually use it on mobs, the problem is that on bosses, most of the time, you won't be able to proc Zephus, and you won't get that haste increase. So on boss fights, Zephus kind of becomes pretty terrible, but there are boss fights with spawn ads, and those ads maybe can be rooted or whatever, and then you can proc Zephus. It just requires a lot more management, but Zephus is viable, but it's just, you need to know how to use it. You need to know the fight inside out, and you need to know the bosses beforehand to actually use Zephus. Everything else, Tearstone is pretty bad. Boots are terrible, wrists are okay, but I still would not go. Pridus, Belt, Ring, well, Solo the Archdruid, and Balance are your strongest combination of legendaries. If you have those, pick from those, and they're gonna work really well. Like I said, Solo the Archdruid, mainly only for tier 20 build. Let's look at like small tips that you have as a Resto Druid. As for being a Resto Druid, like you can see the Mythic Dungeon Invitationals, the Resto Druids are doing really well. Utility is a big thing as a Resto Druid. So first of all, you should never really die, especially with things like Pridus, purely for the fact because you have your bear farm. You make sure you have your bear farm keybinder somewhere, because you can go in and out of the bear farm. It's almost like having personal cooldown that's on GCD. On your global cooldown. You can use it anytime. If you feel you're gonna take more damage, you can pop Bear Skin, and after taking damage, you can go and pop your Frenzied Regeneration that's gonna heal you up to full in like 3 seconds or something. So this is like incredibly strong. I can't stress this enough about how powerful Bear Form is for Resto Druids. It's arguably one of the best defensive abilities in the game right now, and having this as a Resto Druid is one of the things that make you a machine in 5 months. Anytime there's a big explosion, anytime a boss targets you, make sure you have target frames enabled so you can see when the boss targets you and he's casting an ability. You're like, okay, I'm like 30% HP or something. I'm just gonna go Bear Form and pop a Bear Skin or something like that, and this is probably most likely gonna help you to survive. Now, besides that, you have things like you can go Kitty DPS. Kitty DPS is by far the most efficient way to actually do DPS. It does require you to go into melee range. Like I said, I have a video below if you want to check it out to get more into it. You have Ursak Vortex. What Ursak Vortex does, if this was a mob, you place an Ursak Vortex here and the mob tries to escape, the mob is going to be pulled back in. Now, this is if you're dying from cats, panthers, or whatever, like Dark Heart Ticket, the very start fight, Halls of Valor, like before the third boss, second boss, depending on which way you go. The panthers, any panthers that jump and leap, put Ursak Vortex there. They're going to jump and they're going to be brought back in. On fortified, on high mythic plus fortified keys, Ursak Vortex will save you lives. Will make these boss almost trivial if you can use it properly. If you can use it, make sure you pop your Ursak Vortex on the mob and make sure you're like max range so you can see. If you're standing really close, if you're standing inside the Ursak Vortex, the mobs will jump to you and they won't be pulled back in. So you need to make sure you stand a good bit away. They're going to be pulled back and they're gonna save lives. That's really good. Again, like I said, Typhoon is incredibly strong on Sanguine affixes, where the mob stand in Sanguine. I recommend you getting some recores that tell you when a mob stands in Sanguine. You just go in and Typhoon them. That is really, really strong, especially if you actually run. If you run some mythics and you don't pick Typhoon or something, and you see a mob healing, and you're struggling to kill, especially on like 45 weeks or something, you're struggling to kill a mob that's healing in a Sanguine. You'll see how much time you can actually lose. Typhoon becomes super, super vital. And besides that, you're a druid. You have stealth. You can actually do a lot of things with stealth. If you're like me, if you're a night elf as well, you can run with shadow meld, and you can actually go these suicide runs where everyone dies and you shadow meld, or you just stealth past and do things like that. But that's just really basic. These are some of the, hopefully this was not too long, but this is some of the tricks and tips that I use on Mythic Plus. This is some of the talents that I use. I recommend people to actually try and get tier 20 and tier 19 two-piece set, because I feel that tier 20 is it's a lot easier to use than raids, especially if you run a melee comp. If you've seen the Mythic Plus invitation, a lot of people actually running with 2 melee and obviously a tank, so you always will have 3 people. And Efflorescence is just Efflorescence with Swiftman is a really efficient and really quick way to actually get 3 people from like 10 to full in a couple of seconds. It's actually really, really strong. If you really dismiss tier 20 because you're raiding and you feel like in raids tier 20 is really bad, try out tier 20 in Mythic Plus content. You'll be surprised about actually how strong tier 20 is, especially like in Mythic Plus content. And like I said, with tier 24 set, you actually get to run tier 19 2 set, which is really strong. But don't take my word for it. You don't actually need any tier sets, I feel, for any of the Mythic Plus content, except if you're running something really high. You can get away with just running with no tier sets. You can get away with running, you can get away with running the tree. You can get away with running with Spring Blossoms if you have a melee comp as well. You can get away with running any of these. There's so many. The only thing I don't recommend, Inner Peace. Don't go Inner Peace. That's just stupid. That's just stupid. You don't want to go Inner Peace. Trank is never going to be really required to be used on cooldown. But every other talent, like, go for it. Try it out. See what works for you. There's probably going to be people telling you, no, this talent is way better. It might not be, because not the way you play. Maybe you want to play a different style. Maybe the comp is different. I feel that Mythic Plus is a way to experiment with talents, and there's really no right or wrong talents in it except for Inner Peace. Don't go with Inner Peace. Don't go Inner Peace. But like I said, this is the way I run with tier 19 and tier 20. This is the way I use the spells. I feel tier 20 is very efficient and probably better way to go. But if you don't have the tiers, you can still get a good run going as the Resto Druid, especially the Resto Druids being super, super strong. Let me know how you feel about this guy. Let me know how you feel about running Mythic Plus as a Resto Druid. And thank you for watching this Resto Druid 5-man guide.